4, 3, 2. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen here so that everyone can see the beautiful presentation that we've got set up for today's conversation. All right, here we are. And then I'm going to go live on Zoom. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Mariella Marie, and as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. I have the pleasure of presenting our awesome guest speaker who's going to drop a ton of knowledge in this next hour. I consider her a dear friend, and we actually got to meet because I was interviewing her a couple of times with Power to Fly, I guess over the past 2 years. Oh my goodness, time has flown. And I don't want to waste too much time because I know she's really excited about this topic. And this is a very, very, very important topic that we're going to be sharing with everyone. So I just want to say, your participation is key. We would love to invite you to participate, and you can do that in a couple of ways. You can do that by turning your camera on if you feel called to do so. You can come off mute whenever you have something that you want to share. No need to remind you all, crazy things going on in the world, and you could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to spend the hour with us. And with that said, we really, really want to encourage you to participate. And don't worry, I will sound like a broken record by the end of this conversation to remind you to hop off mute and to, turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. If you do hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording as this is being recorded. And this is also a good time for me to remind everyone to put that multitasker hat off, or take that hat off, and be present with us in the next hour. So close those tabs, try to be present with us so that you can jump in and share your reflections or your questions throughout this hour. And then you can rewatch this video later as it is being recorded on Power to Fly, and you can take notes vigorously there. If anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, great. You can find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately, and then I will flag your question or your reflection and keep you anonymous to our guest speaker. The last thing that I'll say is we'd love for you to follow us on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store. And if this is your first time attending a chat and learn where I've moderated, I just want to take a couple seconds to introduce myself. So as I said before, my name is Mariella Marie. I'm calling from Patagonia, which is why I'm all bundled up here because it's winter here. It's really cold. And I love bringing our conversations back to how we can deepen our emotional intelligence in the workplace and at home. So I might reflect with our guest speaker at that level of, how we can recharge our emotional intelligence and just bring our best selves to the table. If you're interested in supporting my project, you can go to thepositiveforceteam.org. You can subscribe to our newsletter, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect there and chit chat there with you. All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker, Noelle Johnson, who's calling from Nashville. Hopefully I can get her down here to Patagonia one day soon. Noelle, I already know a lot about you, but for those who are just joining and are, tuning in for the first time listening to you speak, can you share a little bit about yourself? Let us know how you came to learn about Power to Fly and what you're excited to share with us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you all for joining. So a little bit about my background. I've always worked in operations. So I was always the right-hand person, the CEO, and making sure the company culture overall was managed. So whether it was working for a small company or a larger one, normally I was working in the tech industry and making sure that everybody had what they needed, handling recruiting. And this kind of led into me running my own business called My Interview Buddy. This is a career services company. And through that, I was able to take a look at what I noticed was an issue with women interviewing and making themselves smaller than I could see on their resume that they were. And I realized that there wasn't really a good place for people to learn how to interview well outside of, career services in college, and people kind of leave that behind. So I came up with My Interview Buddy to help people there. And also because I noticed that 70% of people didn't like their jobs. So I wanted to get people into the jobs that they wanted. Last year, my sister and I launched a diversity, equity, and inclusion company called Johnson Squared Consulting. And through that, we were able to really work on the other side of it. So I was helping people get into jobs so that they love them, but then I wanted to make companies the kind of place that people love. I've been spending a lot of time just connecting, especially with women in technology. So when I heard about Power to Fly, it was a perfect fit. And whenever I hear that there's an opportunity that's going on, I love to jump on it, because I think the people that are there, like Mary Eller, just fantastic. I love their mission. So it's just been really great. And we've been staying aligned with this really important work that they've been doing and really helping lead the charge in DEI. So it's just been excellent. And one other thing I just wanted to add in is that on this topic specifically, this is something that I've been doing research on for the last 2 years, where my sister and I are actually working on a book about corporate gaslighting and psychological safety at work. So we put out a survey. I actually have Caroline, who's on the call, who helped us come up with the survey. She's excellent. And through that survey, we were able to get feedback from about like 150 people, something like that, across industries, to talk about things that they can't talk about at work, in all kinds of really high profile positions, people who work for the Army, people who work in technology, people who feel like they've been pushed onto the outside and they didn't have anybody to really listen to them. So they had a chance to kind of do that with us one-on-one and also through surveying. And I'm excited to take these findings and help people understand a little bit more about what it looks like. Is this a me problem or is this a company problem? So I'm excited to walk you through some of the things that I've learned that you can apply to your companies and to your own lives.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations. And I'm definitely looking forward to the book release. So please, please, please keep me posted on that. Caroline, thanks for coming on camera. And thank you for helping Noelle and her sister collect all that data so that they can just, really show the world where we have opportunity to grow. Let's look at it in a positive way, right? So courageous folks coming forth to share their story. And I'm definitely looking forward to the book. With that said, can you just talk about some of the principal themes that you plan on covering in this next hour?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important things is to be able to identify and learn how to manage whenever you realize that corporate gaslighting is happening. So once you realize that that's what the issue is, what your next step is. And not everybody is going to be able to just leave their jobs. That's often what people will tell you. We'll just go and find something else. Well, if you love what you do and you actually like the company that you're working for, or you just can't leave because of obligations, I'll talk about some things that you can do. And then also ways to establish boundaries. So boundary setting is one of the most essential things that I think that we learn how to do, regardless if we're in a toxic work environment or not. Even if you have an amazing supervisor and the company is great, there's still times that you have to put your foot down. So I'm going to go over some ways to establish boundaries.
I love that you're highlighting boundaries. I mean, and it seems like such a simple thing, but it is so difficult to practice that. I mean, in our personal lives and in our professional lives. What is that age-old saying? You give an inch and they take a mile, right? So like learning how to not just overgive and overindulge so that you don't lose a part of yourself and get lost in the sauce, right? So I love that you're going to show ways that we can establish our boundaries. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to pull up these awesome questions that you folks have submitted previous to the chat. And I just want to shout out that we're calling from lots of different places here. So Noelle is calling from Nashville. I'm calling from Patagonia. We've got, let's see, I'm just going to shout out folks who have already written in the chat box. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and put that in the chat box. So we're calling from Connecticut. We're calling from Walnut Creek, California. We've got Buenos Aires on the line as well. Long Island, New York, the Bay Area. Great. So I'm so happy that you all are joining us. If you hear your question come up, please let us know that you are here live with us. And if you don't hear a question come up that you didn't get a chance to submit, or maybe something comes to mind in the moment, you have the opportunity to write in the chat anytime you want, or you can hop off of mute at any time that you'd like. I just would like to remind folks, let's be respectful and have one person off of mute at a time. Okay, so Noelle, let's start with this first question here. Can you clarify the difference between imposter syndrome and gaslighting? Absolutely. Is it possible to experience them both at the same time?
Yes. And I'm not sure if you're also sharing your screen with the questions. It's okay if you're not, but
I'm not sharing my screen. Perfect. I wanted to have some FaceTime. Yeah. And just I'll feed you the questions as we go through the hour. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. So I see that there's a major difference in between the two when it comes to imposter syndrome and gaslighting, but it feels really similar because sometimes we're being gaslit, whether it's in a relationship or if it's at work, we can start to feel it inside as like, well, then I'm doing something wrong. That's really what gaslighting is. But once you're able to really identify that this is not a you problem, this is a manager problem, this is a department issue, this is a problem with the company overall, it makes it a lot more clear. So I think that what's important is to take some inventory of what you're actually doing. So if somebody's making you feel like you're not very smart and you're getting that over and over again, you're starting to question yourself, are you actually doing everything that you were supposed to be doing? And maybe this person has expectations that are beyond what you were really supposed to hit. So getting really clear on that, and it does take a lot of time to kind of sit and feel. I'm a big fan of journaling, and I feel whenever gaslighting is starting to come up, when I start to write things down, and then I have to take a moment and say, is this really me, or is this the way that this person makes me want to feel? Are they manipulating me, whether it's intentional or not? I don't think that everyone who gaslights you is intentionally trying to gaslight you. It just might be something that they're doing and they're self-conscious, but I need to know who I am before I start to say, well, I'm an imposter. So I hope that answers the question to the person who asked.
You know what? I just love that you are coming back to this self-awareness point, which is one of the most important parts, I would say, in emotional intelligence and developing our emotional intelligence, right? Starting within before we can go without. So this journaling aspect that just helps you kind of be more clear and be more reflective before reacting and maybe, doing something that maybe won't be beneficial for you or for the workplace in general. So I love that you're saying, take it into your own hands, reflect, see if this is something that is being misunderstood within your own being, or if there's like a real communication issue when it comes to teams or other people that are joining in on the conversation. So I really love that you're bringing that awareness back to self-reflection, self-awareness. And journaling also sounds very simple, right? Journal, and some people say, well, it's not for me. Maybe they got a bunch of red marks in English class growing up in high school, which kind of makes you less inclined to want to write or journal. But can you just explore that a little more with us today? Why do you recommend journaling?
So when I start to feel like there's something going on and I'm questioning my own character and I'm questioning my own intelligence and I start to write things down, I can start to pick up on themes where I realize I always start to feel this way after I have this meeting, or I always feel this way after I talk to this particular person, or after, my company does an event and I'm cut off at the knees every time I need to speak out loud. This tends to happen. And then I can start to piece things together and go, oh, okay, this is what it's coming from. And sometimes if it is imposter syndrome, I'm able to kind of pinpoint of, oh, this is where it came from, like back in school, or, if my parents or whatever it is. But when I see that the same thing is happening at work and I can point to particular times, I'm able to kind of be like a detective with it. So I see it a little bit less of an emotional exercise, even though it absolutely can be, and more of a way to help me get some clarity when I go, oh, that came up before. What was that?
Beautiful, beautiful. Absolutely. So I definitely encourage folks to take Noelle's advice and start to get that clarity by writing and just kind of dumping out and being reflective as well. Because I know that oftentimes, maybe we let a year or two pass and we have so much anxiety towards a situation when maybe if we could just take a little, 2 minutes after each event, like you said, or meeting, and just kind of unpack that a little bit with putting pen to paper. I think that would be very helpful, at least to start off seeing what could be worked through. So thank you so much for that, Noelle. Let's move on to the next question here. Are there any common features of a toxic workplace? It can be very hard to see red flags. It could be very hard to see red flags, especially for those new to a company or industry.
Yeah, I love this question because sometimes when you walk into a new company, you're not sure, is this like a really hectic time? Is this particular person? Like what's really going on? So here are some of my biggest red flags. One, and it can be another thing where it's like, is this you or is it the company? But it's something to look out for, is when you feel like you like what you do, but you don't want to go into work. Like you have this feeling of dread when you have to go to work every day, but you do enjoy what you do day to day. Like that's something that says like there's something that isn't right. Take a look out for really bad communication, whether people are really passive aggressive, or on the other side of that, if it's like a toxic positivity. I worked at an office where they put up these posters all over the place that had all these happy faces, but they said things like, stay in your own lane and don't be a complainer. And the idea was to make things more positive. But what turned out was people felt scared to make mistakes. They were afraid to ask for help. And it ended up being a more toxic than it was helpful. You want to look out for anything that's like very gossipy. If it's very cliquey, like that's always a flag that, you know, people can't cross-team collaborate. We can't really work well together. There's going to be issues. And it starts to feel like, am I in high school? Like I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. It doesn't feel good. Poor leadership, when we see that, whether it's a CEO or some folks that are in the C level, when that shows up, that's an issue. We also want to take a look out for high turnover. And if there is very little mobility, so you see that people are not getting promotions, that seems to be a theme. That's something to look out for, especially if that's something that you want in your careers to move up. If it's not happening for anybody, there may be something that's going on, but it's a toxic problem, or there's a money flow issue. If there's a money flow issue, it can be a very psychological and unsafe place to work as well. And then lastly, whenever you start to feel burnt out, so when you're just all the time, and I know Power to Fly does a lot on burnout, and I really welcome you to look at some of the articles that they have about it. But when you're starting to feel consistently burnt out, it's a huge red flag that there's something that's going on. If it's just we're working to the deadline of this one big project, that's one thing. But if it's all the time, you always feel like you're on, there's no work-life balance, that's definitely a huge indicator that there's a problem going on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Toxic positivity, that's real. I never heard it put that way, but as you were giving that example as well, I definitely have seen that. And how do you confront that? You know, what would someone do if they see that? And, you know, it kind of has this, I don't know, this expectation of, I would say manipulation even, to yeah. What would you suggest someone do if they see this kind of, you know, things put on the wall?
Yeah, I mean, it's something like that. I think being able to point to this is why this is actually a problem to somebody that can make a change in that is really important to do. But with toxic positivity overall, what ends up happening is that if you have anything negative to say about it, it comes across like you're being a bad team player. And that's why they set it up that way, so that you feel like you have to be a good team player. So if you're having this conversation with somebody, you can say, listen, I'm an excellent team player. You know that from the work that I do, but this is a problem and this is why. Could we maybe do this instead? Because I feel like, especially when it comes to managers, if you can give them a solution, you can point to the problem, but that solution is there, they're much more inclined to listen and make a difference and make a change if necessary. But when people hear this is toxic positivity, then they start to get really defensive. But you can say, like, this is the way that it's affecting me. I've heard that it's affecting other people in this way. Maybe we can do this instead, because it just isn't as helpful as you think it might be.
And actually, that makes me feel, I mean, just in the example that you gave now, there's a level of empathy there, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, maybe the person that is putting this, you know, these messages around to try to, you know, develop some positivity that ends up being toxic positivity, maybe they don't realize it for myriad of reasons. But to have that person come up and say, you know, this is who I am. You've seen the work that I've done, but I'm seeing that other people are being affected like that, you know, and how would you feel essentially if you were put in this situation, this kind of empathy tool that we can use to help build, you know, better morale within teams, and so that everyone can be productive and there's no resentment, you know, and there's no there aren't any toxic boundaries. I guess if you're talking about toxic positivity, there can also be toxic boundaries.
Sure, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's like finding where that line is, and it takes some practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next question here. I see we've got some folks putting the thumbs up there. So thank you all for participating. And I would love to hear from you. So this is my time to say, if you ever want to hop off mute, feel free to hop off mute or write in the chat box. We would love to hear from you. Until then, let's move on to this next question. So sometimes the only way to get problems addressed is by tying them to company profits. Are there any resources or metrics on the effects of gaslighting on employee performance?
Yes. So, and that is so true. A lot of companies aren't going to make anything change until they can see how it's going to impact their bottom dollar. SHRM, and I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's like the huge like HR platform that if you are looking to get a certification is through them, SHRM. So they calculated that turnover due solely to a toxic workplace has cost organizations over $223 billion over the last few years. Then Gallup, who I love so much and I use them all the time, they show that there is a 70% increase in productivity when there's a more psychologically safe environment. So giving that number is helpful because sometimes they don't want to look at, oh gosh, so many people are going to leave the workplace. But if I can show the positive things that are going to happen if we change this, that's going to be great. Another stat that Gallup came up with was there's a 20% increase in sales when there's a work environment where employees are more engaged, and that's a more psychological safe environment.
And I love the power of data, right? So a lot of times, the big question mark over like, how do we use data in a way that is beneficial, and respectful? I think this is definitely one of the ways we can use data to show, actually you're losing money if this happens, or, we can be more productive, if these things are avoided. So thank you so much for highlighting that.
Some of the things that can happen with businesses is that, and we'll have this call when we have our initial call with the company, and they'll say, well, what am I going to get out of this if we start working on, if in their workplace, for one example in particular, they had a huge issue with racism. And like, well, do I need to invest all this money? Do I really need to do all this stuff? And I was like, so you actually contacted me because you said that you had a lawsuit that was pending. This is something that's going to continue to happen. You can point to like what is going on in the world. If you don't think that people aren't screenshotting toxic emails and sharing them on TikTok, you're mistaken. It's happening all the time, and it can destroy, especially a small business. It can rip a company to shreds, or it can cost a company a lot of money to fix once things go public. And people do that, especially when they feel free enough, like maybe they've left. It makes it a lot more easy for them to do that if they haven't already gotten legal counsel. So why take the chance and make a change now?
And thank you for bringing up, the experience that you have walked through, different companies with to try to troubleshoot some problems that they're bringing to you in your business. I think it's very important to see that, people are trying to approach these really hard topics, like let's say the isms, the racisms, the sexisms, and they're finding people like you to work through those problems. But then there is that pushback, right? Like, I don't know, should we put the money towards this? But well, yes, because it's important, or at least to invest some time and to be purposeful about it, right? You said practice is important in this, and it can't be just resolved with, actually, it can't be resolved with only money. There has to be an approach to make sure that we're implementing it throughout. So thank you for highlighting that as well, Noelle.
Of course.
All right. So Caroline just actually dropped in the chat box the acronym for SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. So she also says that it's a great resource if anyone is listening now and wants to search more about SHRM. We actually work a lot with SHRM here at Power to Fly as well. All right. So let's move on to this next question here. What's the best way to raise this subject at work? I'm nervous to go to HR or to go over my supervisor's head, but similar complaints in other departments have been ignored. And I would also like to hear you touch on what if the company or what if the small organization doesn't have an HR? Because I know a lot of startups don't have HR departments.
Yes, and I've been in that position, so I'll definitely touch on that. I think that what's important is to keep in mind that some companies may see you as a complainer if you're the only one that's voicing out these issues all the time. So your approach really needs to be smart. So having everything written down is important. As you see events happen, like make sure that you're recording them. There is strength in numbers. So if you're hearing this along the pipeline that other people are having the same problem, see if you can speak with them as well, and if you can collaborate on a way to help solve the problem. Now, I do want to say with that, we don't want to make sure that we're having a bunch of lunches just to say, oh my gosh, this is so terrible and I can't stand being here. Like that doesn't make anything happen. But if you can come together to say, these are where I see that there's some major issues, maybe we can approach, the CEO or the HR manager in this way, it's going to be helpful. And then also, if you notice that there is somebody who is on the C level who is rolling their eyes at the same moment on the Zoom call because something is appropriate that you are, that's somebody to send a message to afterwards and say like, hey, I noticed that you had a visceral reaction to that. Can we talk about it a little bit? Because they have a little bit more influence sometimes. And that is good to have. Now, if you don't have HR, and I've been in this situation before, whoever is in managing operations, that's a good person to contact. So it doesn't necessarily need to be HR overall. And especially if your HR department is detached from the organization, like it's like a third party, they're not going to be able to do a whole lot. So knowing who that person is at the top that's able to make a change is the person to contact. Now, when it's a smaller organization, they can be so tied up with all the startup things, like everybody's hands is in a bunch of different things, and they're not always looking at company culture. They actually rarely are. So because of that, you can bring it to their attention. Hopefully they're surprised, and then they can start talking about some ways to fix it.
And actually, we have Marta, who just dropped something in the chat that I'm going to read out loud. Thank you so much for this quote here. 58% of employees who quit a job due to workplace culture say that their managers are the main reason they ultimately left. And the cost of this turnover, $223 billion in the past 5 years. Noelle, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, completely agree. That's the same statistic that I was sharing earlier. And that 50%, I feel like a lot of people don't quit jobs, they quit bad managers. And I've left jobs where I was crying and I was like, I love my job, but I have to leave because I'm not safe here anymore. And it sucks, but it's important that that does get voiced out. So hopefully, the company does the right decision in doing whatever is necessary to get that leader on the right path or out of the company if necessary.
So what do you do if you aren't comfortable saying that you left because of your manager? But you do, believe still in the mission of the company and you want to avoid that happening with anyone else? How would you approach, that situation so that, things can be better for the next person who might take that role? I mean, if someone is thinking that way, I know a lot of times we just want to get out to save our own selves, but
Yeah.
to, make sure that we're setting someone else for success. How would you approach that?
I think that if there is like a sympathetic ear that's in the C-suite, to let them know everything about it, because if you're not getting the support that you need from HR and that's the route that you take, and you can say this is, you're going to continue to lose really good people. I can see that it's coming, and here are some of the things that you can do that weren't done in time for me to want to stay. So I think that's a really important conversation to have. And this is also, it's important to in the interview process, when you're looking for something new, to be able to talk and say, I love my company, I love what I was doing, the day-to-day was great, but the problem was I wasn't able to be aligned with some of the things that I was seeing because of ethics reasons or whatever it may be, without giving everything away.
Okay, so we're going to talk more about interview tips later. So I'm glad that you
Of
kind
course.
of gave us that preface. So stick around so that we can touch on that later, everyone who's joining live. But for now, let's move on to this next question. Once we voiced our concerns, how can we stay strong and stand strong and be taken seriously when we don't have the support or validation of other team members?
That's a really difficult place to be when you feel like you're the only person on top of the mountain that's seeing that everything is a huge problem. So I think what's important is to take emotions out of things as much as you can. And that's not always easy. And I actually really don't love giving that advice, especially to women, because we're told to not be emotional. But when it comes to your own psychological safety and your own mental health, you have to be able to take as much emotions out of it. So whether you have a manager that's always yelling all the time, or just overall there's all these problems that are happening, make sure that you kind of keep your head down and get your work done until you're ready to make whatever that next move is, as you're waiting for them to make a change that you're that we're not sitting too much in our emotions because we can get stuck there. This can also happen, like I was saying before, when we're spending time with other people that are having the same issues. We can just come together and complain, but it doesn't actually feel really good when we don't have any solutions and it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight. And then it also makes it harder for us to move on to the next position. When we have this camaraderie over all of these problems that are happening at the company, we feel like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving them. So we want to make sure that you just continue to do excellent at what you do, and be, a safe place for people to come and talk to. Like, I noticed that you mentioned that there was an issue here. I saw that you laid out a boundary for this person that said something, and having them feel like they can come to you is great, but you want to make sure to be taken seriously that we don't get overly emotional when we're starting to share.
Absolutely. And I see we've got someone who wants to hop off mute. So go ahead and unmute yourself and voice your question or your reflection.
Hi, thank you so much, Noelle. My name is Sachi. I'm a DEI consultant and trainer.
Hello.
So nice to meet you. My question relates to what you were just talking about finding other people who are experiencing the same thing because there's strength in numbers. How do you go about studying that? And my question is two-part. How do you go about studying that conversation to try to find other people? Like, you don't know if what they're doing to you in private, they're doing to other people. And of course, being a reflective person, you want to make sure you're not just imagining things. And so you want to look for other people. But how do you start that conversation without it being like, you don't want to gossip, you don't want to tarnish people's images, but you also want to find out if there's other people. How do you start that conversation? So that's part one. Part two is I generally don't like to embarrass people or shame them in public. I tend to give people a benefit of the doubt. So if I feel like something is wrong, I try to address it privately. But that doesn't always work. Some people only respond to public shaming. How do I develop the spine to do that? I don't like to hurt people, but I think sometimes it's needed.
Yeah, well, these are two really excellent questions. For the first one, when you're trying to identify who the other people are, sometimes people will just let themselves be known. You can tell that people are uncomfortable, they're shifting in their seats. They suddenly turn off their video at the same time as other people do on Zoom. Like, you can get a feeling for it. But like you said, you don't want to gossip. So if you have people, especially if they're in the same affinity group that you're in, and you can say, I felt really uncomfortable on today's call. Did anybody else feel that way? Or I might say to some people, I'm starting to feel like I'm doing something wrong and I'm not quite sure. Can you take a look at this and see what you think? And just kind of leave that open. That way you're not really leading them to say, yeah, what that person said wasn't okay, or yeah, they're being overly critical of these different things. You're just kind of leaving it as an open question to give them an opportunity to kind of say how they feel, and just leave it there. And as far as, confronting somebody, I do a lot of talking about this. I do this whole workshop on calling in versus calling out. I think that there is an opportunity to really be vulnerable with people and let them know, especially if you know that the intention wasn't to be problematic. And you can say, look, I know you, and that doesn't sound like you. Or when you said this, it made me feel like this, which is like an old psychology method that really does do wonders when you're able to say like how that made me feel. I don't think that was your intention, but this is how I was made to feel. And when you talk to them privately, maybe they made a joke that was off color and very uncomfortable. Can you explain what that joke was supposed to mean? Because to me, this is the way that I received that. It gives them an opportunity to clarify, apologize, and then also have a good understanding of how that could be interpreted in a different way. Or if you see that maybe a manager is just doing something that you just don't think is effective, and you can say, I would actually work so much better if we did it this way. Is that something that you think that we can work towards? So making it a little bit more open and less like you're wagging your finger at them, what makes people feel less defensive and less likely to have a bad reaction, because not everybody receives that feedback well, even if you are very gentle about it. But if you know that intention is good, that's important. Now, the opposite side of that, somebody's being intentionally cruel, intentionally rude. And sometimes you have to call somebody out right away and say, like, that's not okay, or I have to remove myself from this conversation. And I know I'll be talking about that a little bit more later, but having those boundaries set is really important in those moments.
Yeah. So if you tried everything you just said and it doesn't work, you were nice, open, give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, I know you didn't mean this, blah, 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 blah. And they still do not bother.
Yeah.
And because that's kind of who they are. How do you develop that spine? So like, because they will only listen to consequences, it seems. And how do you develop that spine to give them the consequences that they'll listen to?
Well, I mean, I think that you just have to be able to kind of come to a resolution within yourself to say, like, this is something I'm not going to stand for anymore. I work too hard to be talked to in this way. I've done too much to have to deal with this. It's not fair. So whenever they do this, I'm going to do this, and let that person know that. So like, let's just use somebody raising their voice for an example. And that's something that they always do, and talk to them about it. And they're like, well, I'm just a passionate person. And sometimes I curse people out, but they know that's just what I do. And this, I've had this conversation. Okay, if that's what you do, what I'm going to do the next time you do that is I'm actually going to get off of the line, because I'm not going to be talked to that way. And then we can have a conversation when you feel like you can talk at a normal tone. And it's not unprofessional, and it doesn't feel comfortable doing it at first, but you have to like start to baby step it and let them know this is what's going to happen. And when it happens, hey, I told you, so I'm gonna hang up now. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Great questions.
Yes, great questions. And actually, just to invite folks to our chat tomorrow, she will actually be hosting her own conversation about building bridges as a way for true and effective allyship. So I dropped the link in the chat for those of you, yes, who are joining live. And for those who are rewatching this, just go to Power to Fly and find that chat. And hopefully we see you tomorrow. So thank you so much for the awesome questions. Noelle, thank you for diving deep there on your response. Now let's go to this next question here. Let's get into more of the job search and interview process. So my current job is very psychologically unsafe and generally just an unsupportive environment. Are there signs I should look out for during my job search or while interviewing to tell if another organization will have these same problems?
Yes. So I think that asking questions at the end of an interview is the most important part of an interview. You doing well is great, but you want to make sure that you want them as much as they want you. So one, if you can do an informational interview with somebody who works there, they're extremely helpful, and it kind of lets people have an opportunity to say the truth on what they think when, with working there. Outside of that, I think that before going on the interview, we want to make sure that we're checking reviews. So, and I think that's a lot of our go-to. We go to Glassdoor, we go to Power to Fly. We want to see what those rankings are, how they're doing, and seeing some of that feedback on what people think when they work there. Also take a look at what you see on LinkedIn under hiring trends. So if I see that there's been a lot of turnover, or I notice that people don't stay there longer than 8 months, that's something I'm going to bring up on the end of the interview when they ask if I have any questions. And I can say, hi, so I noticed on LinkedIn that the median average of people that stay at the company, it's about 8 months. Can you talk to me a little bit about why that is? It's okay to put people on the spot. They're putting you on the spot. So get comfortable doing that. It's important to understand. But you can also ask questions that are a little bit leading to find out what their work environment is like outside of what they just tell you when you say, what's your work culture like? So you can ask questions about, how did you manage COVID? Because we're seeing that there's a lot of friction in between, the businesses and the employees on how they've managed that. What is your department's biggest challenge right now? So if I can get an idea of how you manage a challenge, it's going to give me an idea of the way that you manage. I also like the question, how would you describe yourself as a manager? And I've had answers to that question while interviewing that have made me so uncomfortable. I'm like, thank God I asked that question, because that response was cuckoo bananas. I can't believe that that's the way that you manage people. So like, let me step myself away. So asking those questions to give people a chance to kind of tell them themselves or talk about how great things are, it really can help you develop the understanding if it's going to be the right choice for you or not, and see those red flags.
I love that. And Caroline writes in the chat box, you might be surprised how forthcoming people who are not the hiring manager will be in informational interviews. And I know, usually there is some talk about, yeah, going to Glassdoor and seeing things that people officially post, but then you have, the people that have a deeper story to share that maybe you can find elsewhere, or maybe you have to, through networking, through mentorship, you might find, how to dig deeper with, some more, I would say, less gray area responses and more kind of, more concrete. This is why I left, I became a mother and this is how I was treated, or I became I had to move to a different country and this is how the standards were when I was on the team. How can we dive deeper? Are there any other resources outside of social media? I know you're going to speak about mentorship a little later, but can you just speak about the power of networking in this case, for example, to kind of dive deeper?
Yeah, I really think that LinkedIn is the best place. I know you said social media, but LinkedIn, I think, is the best place to go to start to reach out to people, especially like they're in the department that you want to work in, and just ask them, or somebody who's recently left the company, and you can find that information out on LinkedIn as well, and let them know, hey, I'm actually applying for this role. I'm on, this part in the interview process, and I would love to talk to somebody who has worked there. Now, with reviews and with informational interviews, you want to take with a grain of salt. They might have been the problematic person there, or also on some of the things that we see with reviews, sometimes companies can influence employees to write positive reviews when it isn't positive. So we really need to take that with a grain of salt. But I think with those informational interviews, those are the best ways to get like some clarity. But take a look out for anything that sounds like maybe this person is really needed to go to a different company because they just sound like they were going to be unsatisfied no matter what. So like get an idea. And if you can, do more than one so that you can compare notes.
And I love the advice that you're giving, ask those tough questions. Don't be afraid, because it's a partnership, right? It's you are not going to be a slave working for this company. You need to make sure that it is going to be a healthy partnership. So asking those tough questions off the bat will help set you up for success. And like you said, oh, the way this person responded makes me like so happy that I didn't take that job because this was their response, for example. So thank you so much for that transparency. All right, so let's move on to the next question here. Not all of us have the ability to leave our toxic work environment. What options do we have to make our situation more tolerable? And I would actually love for you to talk about, the elephant in the room, which is, the global pandemic that is happening now, and, how people just, even if the environment is toxic, they feel like they cannot leave because of the uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's just the reality for a lot of different situations. Now, I am telling folks that, there are a lot more opportunities than you might think is out there. It's still always worth to do the search if if you're in an industry where that's possible for you. There are some things that are just so niche, like academia, where it's just really hard to find another position as a professor, let's say, and you're kind of stuck where you are for a while. So it's important that you can do everything that you can that really support yourself and to keep yourself safe. And also that you're elevating things as much as you need to. So I'm a big fan of the gray rock method, which I think it works great for narcissists. It also works great when you're going through corporate gaslighting. So when somebody is being out of line, having no reaction to it and saying, okay, when they want you to get emotional, or gray rocking somebody who wants to, have an offensive joke, and you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And like when you are very like stony faced about things, people, when they aren't getting the reaction that they want, they start to walk backwards a little bit, and then they know like maybe not this person. Record, and send things over to HR. Stick to doing what you love doing at your job. If you're always doing what you're passionate about, that's important. Talk to people outside of work about what's going on, so you have safe places that you could kind of let this out on, and spend time doing your hobbies and the things that make you feel really passionate, so that you are really like keeping your energy level in a place that makes you feel happier. See if you're able to move to another department, if that's possible. And then also take a look like what's going on down the line that you can look forward to. So maybe you can't leave this job at this point. Maybe you need to wait until your benefits kick in or something happens in like 6 months. If you can know, all right, in 6 months, I'll be able to look. In 5 months, I'll be able to look. In 4 months, whatever it is, when I can take a look at the goalpost, it's going to make this time so much more tolerable when I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So whatever that light is for you, to make that very clear, and you can always look forward to that if you feel like you're in an area that's stuck and these other things that I talked about just aren't going to be working.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Yes, because I know that speaking of, being in between a rock and a hard place, when you have the responsibility of, a family, or, you have these goals that you're trying to reach and you cannot just back out, you have to, stay as long as you can, just how to navigate that and leave at an appropriate time. So thank you, Noelle, for highlighting that.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to the next question here. I'm aware that there aren't any easy solutions to my specific situation. What can I expect or ask HR to do to resolve the issues and protect myself against this behavior in the workplace?
One of the things I'd say to keep in mind before I even dive into this is let HR have an opportunity to try and fix things. It doesn't always happen overnight, but continue to follow up with them because they may be working on something that just like it has to go through all these different trials and tribulations to be able to get to the result that you're looking for. And they might need to get sign off from people and it can take a while, but do give them an opportunity to try and fix it. But what you want to do is to let them know what's going on and how it's affecting you at work. If you know that this is happening in other departments without, letting other people telling them other people's business, you can say, I just noticed that this is also a trend in this department and in this department and in my department with other people. So it's not just me. You may hear from other people. And if you have any ideas on next steps, if you're able to say, like, I think that it would be great if, our company spent some time on bonding, or we worked on these communication issues and we can do it in these ways. I've seen it worked really great in this old company that I work for. Maybe we could try this. So if you have solutions, it's going to make it a lot more easier for an HR person so that they already have some things to jump off on. If you've noticed that there's an issue with one individual person, what might end up happening is that person is put onto a performance improvement plan. They may end up being let go if it's really bad. And all that does take time to happen. You just want to make sure that the HR department is giving you an opportunity to be separated from whoever that person is, if it is one individual. If there's an overarching person, really start to think of some things that you can do to help. Because what we want to avoid is, like I said earlier, we want to avoid being known as somebody who complains. So have everything, really try to remove the emotion out of it. And so like, this is the way that it is impacting the way that work is getting done. We want to make sure that we're being as productive as possible. I can't be productive when these things are going on. Here's some things that maybe we can do to change things. And if you need to be moved into another department, if it's just a department issue, ask if that's something that's possible to happen. But give some ideas and, stay as positive as possible that they're going to do the right things, but give a timeline. When can I expect to hear back from you? When can I expect to see something change? And if it's not happening on that time, kind of hold their feet to the fire on it.
Hold their feet to the fire on it. I love that. I love that suggestion, just for accountability's sake, right? So that we're making sure that we're touching base and making sure that, we are holding each other accountable. I do want to bring up something that is being written in the chat box. For one of my previous jobs, prior to the interview with my boss-to-be, I researched her thoroughly, and she had so many glowing reviews on LinkedIn from previous coworkers, bosses, and employees. I thought I had hit the jackpot with this one, but she turned out to be the most toxic person I ever worked for, perhaps the only one even. Now I'm thinking the 20-something glowing LinkedIn reviews was a red flag. Most people don't usually have that many reviews on their LinkedIn profiles. Would you like to comment on that, Noelle?
Sometimes if somebody got a really bad review, they'll get other people to write a bunch of them to kind of overcompensate for that. But LinkedIn in particular, that might have been somebody who just needed to be known for something that's contradictory. So whether it was pressure or not. Also the way that, that could have been like their little clique, right? Like that could have been everyone they got along with really well. They have drinks after work, like those are her girls or guys or whatever. And they work so great together that they were happy to give a recommendation when asked. Normally, people don't have a lot of recommendations unless they're asked for it. People don't normally feel compelled to unless there's something that's going on. I have a lot of reviews on my LinkedIn because I asked for them, but they're on something that's like very specific. And if you want to, and they all should be different, they shouldn't be saying the same things. You'll also see some that you can tell because the tone is exactly the same. So this person just wrote this and sent it to people and said, please just send it my way, right? So it's definitely something that I would want to take with a grain of salt when I see something like that, because it is a little bit odd to see so much of it, especially if it's in a very short span of time. Lastly, what I'll say in that, she might have had that happen because she was getting in trouble at work and she was being told that she was a bad manager. So she had other people do that so that she can go, well, look at my LinkedIn page. Look at all these really great feedback that I'm getting from people on the team. It can't be that bad. So there could be some manipulation at play there.
It's like another form of toxic positivity, right? Positive reviews on LinkedIn. But actually putting into practice what you said earlier, like asking these hard questions in your interview to make sure that, those LinkedIn reviews are living up to their truth. So, if you hear any red flags in that interview, maybe you can compare that with some of the things you saw on the LinkedIn and just kind of do your own, like you have to become your own detective, as you mentioned in the beginning with journaling. So, it is a big process. Sometimes it's like, yeah, we got the interview, I'm in, great, no matter what, but then you're stuck with someone who's toxic. And maybe if we would have taken some more time to, I don't know, do some more research, which is like, at that point, we want the job, and so we kind of we let things go by the wayside. But I guess we have to just be the masters of our own destiny in this case, so that we don't set ourselves up for that kind of situation. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but it's good that you shared this publicly so that people can be aware of that and just kind of check that T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and we won't have any problems later.
And I mean, not a lot of people feel like they have to tell their manager that they're doing a good job on LinkedIn. That is very rare that you feel like that's something that needs to get done. It's normally the other way around. I want to let everybody in my team know that they're excellent. So let me go through and run through everybody on my team. It doesn't normally happen the other way around. So that's like, yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's a red flag. It's like an orange flag.
All right, everyone. So we've got a little under 10 minutes left. So I just want to make sure if you want to hop off mute, now's your time to shine. Or if you have anything else that you'd like Noelle to touch on, please drop that in the chat box. We have about 8 minutes left. So I'll give you some time to think. And for now, I'll move on to this next question. But I just want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to hop off mute if they want. So how do you deal with gaslighting in a remote setting with no one else to witness the behavior and no paper trail? I try to document this in the post-meeting summary emails I send out, but I'm concerned this won't help me be heard.
Yeah, so when I hear people say that they don't have a paper trail, I think that what they mean is that they don't have any evidence that's been recorded. What the paper trail starts when you start recording things as they happen for your own documents. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that you're sending out to everybody. So having it as like the post-meeting summary emails, like that's something for everyone, but that's not necessarily what you need. So start recording things as they're happening, and so that you can say on this date, this date, this date, this date, and like everything that you've written there. So that way you can kind of hold yourself accountable and be able to show that there's a trend that's going on there. You want to make sure that you're setting out some boundaries with folks if you see that there's something that's going on remotely. And let them know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I think we'll probably end up finishing on talking on boundaries. So I won't spend too much time there so we can wrap up with boundaries. In case that there's no HR, again, go to anybody who leads with operations. If you're noticing that there's something that's going on Zoom calls because you're remote, like make sure that you're taking note of when people are saying things in the chat that are not okay, or you notice people are like making faces or doing something that kind of indicates that you might not be alone, and that might be somebody that you want to just connect with, and just, like I said, have those open-ended questions to see if they feel the same way. And if you notice that things are an issue, make sure that you have those one-on-ones with HR or with that operations manager that can actually make a difference. So use those things to your advantage.
Absolutely. And I know you were touching on boundaries. Let's just jump right into it because we've got about 6 minutes left. So this question reads, do you have any tips for those of us already struggling to set or maintain boundaries in our personal lives?
Yes. Okay. So I think that with establishing boundaries, it's just letting people know what's okay and what's not okay. And it's just like with kids and with pets, when they cross a line, you have to be able to follow through with whatever that consequence is. So for example, maybe you have somebody who is on the opposite aisle of you when it comes to politics, and you've decided that that's something that you're not going to bring up when you're talking, but this person continues to bring it up because they know that it's going to get a reaction out of you, and they're looking for that. So you can say, while you're entitled to your opinion, I'm not going to have that conversation with you. So when you start that up, I'm going to get off of the line. Or if you need to raise your voice in order for me to hear you, I'm not going to continue the conversation. I'm going to walk away. And when they do that, and then you want to make sure that you're recording that, that you're taking things to HR. If you need to physically like get up from your desk and say like, no, I'm not doing that, do that. But whatever it is, whether it's, I am going to hang up the phone, I'm not going to the family reunion, I am going to talk to HR, I am going to report this to the EEOC, I am going to contact a lawyer, like wherever it is, but like elevating things, that you do what you say that you're going to do, or it's not going to stop. And people won't know when to stop messing with you until you do. Now you maybe need to feel like you're the issue, but you still need to be able to set firm on that. So I'll give a quick example. I worked at a company that thought it was fun to like have like Nerf wars in the middle of the workday, and like the CEO would like come by on like on like a scooter and would like shoot people in the face while they're working. I did not like this. And I was asked like, Noelle, well, why won't you like shoot anybody with the Nerf guns? Well, for me, that's actually not fun. And the next time that happens, I'm going to go into an office that's private and close the door because I don't want to be involved with that. Oh, Noelle, don't you want to be a team player? We're all having fun with it. I'm actually not having fun with this, and it actually feels dangerous. And I can't get my work done. It's distracting. I want to do a good job at what I do. It's actually not your job to be friends with everybody. And people say, well, it's a work family and this is family and we all love each other so much. Well, it's not actually family. I have a family at home, right? And I want to get along with everybody really well. It's great if we can develop excellent relationships, but it's not everyone's job to be able to be best friends with everybody here. So if I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to say that I'm uncomfortable and let you know this is what I'm going to do instead. It doesn't have to be drastic, but it does need to say like, this is something I'm actually not cool with. Just so you know, you probably weren't aware of that, but moving forward, this is the way that I'd rather manage that issue.
Wow. I can't believe, wow. Unbelievable. When you were just going through that experience, I got the chills, just like that made me uncomfortable just hearing it. But great job standing up for yourself. And I hope that someone just needed to hear that example today so that they can take encouragement from that. So thank you. Crazy things going on in the world. I told you all. So thank you for being with us for this hour, everyone, and being really engaged in the chat box and hopping off mute. I appreciate it. We've got about 3 minutes left. We didn't get to all of the questions because Noelle has really been doing a great job diving deep. So I really encourage you all to reach out to Noelle if you do have some further questions that did not get to be raised today. Noelle, can you just let us know how you prefer to be connected with, whether it be LinkedIn or your website?
Absolutely. So you can connect with me via email. I'm noelle@johnsonsquare.com. On LinkedIn, I'm I'm Noelle C. Johnson. So you can find me there. And just so that everybody knows, we have just launched a beta of our new membership. This is a DEI membership. So if you're looking to get some training, get some templates, get some resources when it comes to diversity and inclusion, definitely come to Johnson 2 Consulting. We would love to be able to support you with our new membership. So we've got a lot of good stuff going on and would love to stay connected.
Awesome. And when's that book coming out? Remind us again.
I don't know yet, but as soon as the date drops, I'm definitely going to be letting everybody know. It'll be everywhere because I can't stop and won't shut up about it. But we're still in the middle of getting things written, but it did get green light. It did give a green light to be published before even sending out anything, because people are like, "Ooh, corporate gaslighting! Like, tell me all about it." So,
Yes,
because
good.
we all had that experience, so excited for it.
Congratulations. Okay, so we've got 1 minute left. People are singing your praises in the chat box, thanking you. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you so much, Noelle. Can you leave us with some food for thought? I mean, you've dropped so much knowledge in the past hour, but what do you want to leave us with, just so that we can reflect on and maybe, make some moves going forward here when we finish this call?
Absolutely. Well, what I'd say is it's really important to be clear on who you are and what's acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you. Don't bend your integrity in a thing that makes you feel uncomfortable to make other people feel comfortable. You should be able to work in a place that you feel safe. And if that is in jeopardy, it needs to get addressed. Your psychological safety is as important as your physical safety. And if you were feeling physically unsafe, you would do something about it. So it's the same when you feel like there's something going on overall when it comes to mental health in your workplace. So don't take advantage of that.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much again, Noelle, for sharing time with us today and dropping so much knowledge. I appreciate everyone who's joined us live for the call, or if you're rewatching, thank you so much for giving us your attention here. Be sure to connect with Noelle. Clearly, she has a lot to say about this topic, and I know that she's going to make some major moves in this field. So thank you so much. And we'll see you all on the next Chat and Learn.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Noelle. Thank you, Mariela.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.